Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be sharing my third birth, which was a home birth with my daughter, Sophie. Welcome to the MamasteFit Podcast. This is Gina, perinatal fitness trainer and birth doula.
And this is Roxanne, labor and delivery nurse and student midwife.
And this is the MamasteFit Podcast, where we empower you on your prenatal fitness, birth, and postpartum return to fitness journey.
Our podcast shares how to move throughout your pregnancy to stay strong and comfortable. Pain is not a requirement of pregnancy. Understand the science of birth and how to approach recovery after birth.
We share our personal experiences as mothers navigating the stage of lives, plus our professional expertise as birth workers and fitness professionals.
Our goal is to help you feel confident as you navigate the perinatal timeframe for an empowering pregnancy, positive birth, and postpartum journey.
We are glad to have you with us on this journey and that you've chosen us to support you. My husband and I had been planning to have 4 kids. He forgot that we wanted more than 2 kids. And so when I brought up, hey, let's try for our third, he was a little confused. And then I reminded him that I told him that I wanted 4 children and that we were compromising at 3. And so we tried for a third kid, and we were actually shocked that we got pregnant right away, which was really surprising because with our son, we had 2 miscarriages. And so we had a lot of issues like getting pregnant. And so it was like really surprising to get pregnant right away. And at this point, we had a pretty large social media following as well. And so I made the decision to share that I was pregnant pretty much as soon as I found out. I've been very open about my pregnancy losses. I've been very open about my pregnancy journeys. And so for me, it was important that I shared like really early that I was pregnant so that if for whatever reason I had another loss, like I can share that as well to normalize the experience of losing a baby as well. So fortunately, I did not have a pregnancy loss, and it was a pretty like uncomplicated pregnancy, like no real issues, no concerns at all throughout my entire pregnancy, which was really awesome. And we had decided to have a home birth again with the midwife that we had with Owen's birth. And so I got on her books as soon as possible because she books like months in advance. Like as soon as you pee on a stick, you have to call her and let her know that you want her. So we were pretty established with our care right away. My biggest thing that I was dealing with during the earlier part of my pregnancy was trying to figure out who my dual care was going to be. So with home birth for my midwife, you need to have a hospital clinic that you can go to or that you can transfer your care to if you develop a complication during your pregnancy where being at home is no longer safe for you. And so the provider that she has is about an hour and a half away from me. And so if I had developed a complication during my pregnancy that risked me out of home birth, I would go to that hospital. And I had attended a bunch of births at that hospital, and I really love the midwives there and the staff there. It's a wonderful hospital, but it's also really far. And I was like, I don't want to drive that far. And so I tried to find some other clinics that were nearby, but unfortunately, none of the ones that I was reaching out to were supportive of being the secondary care to someone giving birth at home. They didn't want to assume that risk. So I went to my dual care once a trimester to kind of do labs, to do my anatomy scan. And then in the 3rd trimester, I did my GBS swab and glucose test. So all of kind of the major tests that I needed a lab for, I went to them and did it there. So that would be included with my insurance. I ended up just doing my glucose test at home to see if I had gestational diabetes, and it was fine. I just drank some juice, and then I pricked my own finger and then measured it, and I just sent a picture to my midwife. So there are definitely options when it comes to the gestational diabetes screening. You don't have to do the glucola drink if you don't want to. The glucola drink is also fine to drink as well, but know that you do have options with a lot of your care throughout your pregnancy. So Sophie's pregnancy was pretty uncomplicated. And I, again, convinced myself that I was going to go into labor early. I was going to be a 37-weeker. And I think my midwife accidentally planted the seed in my head because she was like, oh, I just had this mom who usually goes to almost 42 weeks and she just had a baby at 37 weeks for her third. And I was like, that's going to be me. Everyone always says the third baby is a wild card. It's going to be so different from your other births. And so I was like, well, this is either going to be a super long, challenging labor, or it's going to be lightning fast and no one's going to make it. Spoiler, it was neither. It was pretty normal for me. But I had convinced myself that I was going to go early. So Roxanne was living out in California at this time, and she was going to fly out at like 38 weeks. And then we had like my mother's blessing after 38 weeks. I think I had a photo shoot at the gym for like third trimester fitness photos. And I was like so anxious that I was going to give birth before we got to do all this stuff. And I was very pregnant for a very long time. I don't know why I keep telling myself that I'm going to go early. I had convinced myself that I would at least go by my due date because for Adeline's pregnancy, I told myself the reason why I went so long, because with her I went to 41 and 3, was because I was really anxious about induction. And I had nothing to be anxious about. Like I was going to have a birth at home. It was going to be everything that I wanted to be. Like there was nothing about my provider that needed me to be anxious about it. With Owen's birth, I was like, oh, well, we just got our house repainted. We were waiting on some insurance approvals. Like we got our floors redone. And as soon as all that stuff was good, then I went into labor. And so I was like, all right, I have nothing holding me back right now mentally or emotionally. Like I can go into labor at any moment. And I went into 41 and 3 with Sophie as well. And it was very confusing for me because I felt like I was mentally ready to give birth. Let's take a break from this week's episode to hear about one of our sponsors, Needed. If you've ever wondered what you should be taking at each stage of the perinatal journey, then I'm really excited to share about Needed's trimester plans. Needed's trimester plans are designed for the 5 distinct phases of the perinatal journey: preconception, all 3 trimesters of pregnancy, and then the postpartum period. These plans build off Needed's complete plan, your optimal baseline support of comprehensive multivitamin, vegan omega-3, a pre and probiotic, and then a collagen protein. What changes my plans are the different add-ons that are needed by each stage. I love this approach because some products are best taken at specific stages depending on where you are during your pregnancy or in the postpartum period. Needed's trimester plans are the optimal way to nourish your body through every stage of the perinatal journey and the best way to save on your monthly supplement needs. To get started, visit thisisneeded.com and use code MamastePod100 for $100 off your first 3 months of your trimester plan. So after I hit 41 weeks, I started definitely feeling a lot more anxious about the fact that I was still pregnant and concerned that I would be pregnant at 42 weeks. And so with home birth in our state, with the provider that I have, you risk out of it at a certain point. So you have to be between 37 weeks and 42 weeks. If you go before that, you would be preterm and you would have to go give birth at the hospital. If you went after that, you would have to go to the hospital to be induced. Or if you went into spontaneous labor, it would be after 42 weeks at the hospital. And for me, it was really important for me to at least try to be at home for my birth. And so I was feeling a little anxious that I was getting closer and closer to this 42-week mark. And I did not want to risk out of home birth. And so now I have this new kind of anxiety and stressor, like reminding me that the closer I get to this, the more likely that I'll have to give birth in a hospital. I'll have to get induced in a hospital setting. And while I like the hospital that I would have had to gone to, I wanted to give birth at home. And so at I think it was 41 and 2, I was still pregnant. My midwife asked if I would like a membrane sweep. And I think I actually brought it up to her. I was like, I want to start doing things to like encourage things to start happening. And we weren't going to go like full on like midwives brew right away. We were going to try the sweep and see if that kind of kickstarted anything. So I started having some cramping that evening. We went for a walk to see if that kind of got things going as well. And then that evening, I actually started having contractions. And I was like, all right, this is it. And this was probably like the 4th or 5th time that I had texted our group chat. Everyone that came to my mother's blessing, we all had tied string around our wrists. And during my labor, everyone cuts the string as this like signal that like we're all sending this positive energy. We're all thinking of you, like, and you meeting your baby. And so everyone's like, every other text, we're like pulling out the scissors, getting ready to go. And then I would be like, just kidding, I'm still pregnant. And so I text everyone and I'm like, hey, this feels like labor. These feel like contractions. And as soon as I text them, as soon as I text my midwife and I text Roxanne, everything like stopped. And I was like, what the? So then I just opted to go to bed. This was probably like 7 or 8 p.m. And I was like, you know what? I'm like tired from this day. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed by the fact that I'm still pregnant. So I'm just going to go to bed. And so my son and I went and we laid down and we went to sleep. Normally every night I'd wake up at like 3 or 4 a.m. to go pee. And so I was like kind of telling myself, I'm like, you know, I bet I'm going to start labor at like 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning. And that night I woke up, or I guess the next morning I woke up at like 3 or 4 a.m. and I was having contractions, and they were very like mild. Like I could sleep through them, but I was feeling them like build, peak, and then release. And so I would describe a contraction almost as like a Charlie horse type sensation where you feel it building, it peaks in intensity, and then it releases. So it's like this little wave, but it's very crampy. Like for me, I feel my contractions in like my lower abdomen. And so I timed them for about an hour. They were coming like every 15-ish minutes. And I was like, all right. So I was really excited. My son decided that he wanted a banana at this point and he wanted to play. And so we got out of bed. I got him a banana. We played for a little bit and then we went back to bed around like 5-ish. Around 7 a.m., I was woken up by a contraction. They were about like 8 to 11 minutes apart. And this is when I like text my midwife. I'm like, hey, I'm having contractions. They're like every 8 to 10 minutes. I text our photographer. I text Roxanne. I think I waited to text the group chat until a little bit later in the day because I was feeling a little nervous that things were going to stop. After I woke up, I went downstairs and I did a short like pelvic opening workout. Before Owen's birth, I also did like a short workout. And so it was just like a nice way for me to like move my body in a really intentional way. It wasn't like super strenuous. It was maybe 20 minutes long and it was mostly like mobility and just focusing on opening my pelvis to kind of prep for labor. And in addition, when I work out, my contractions pick up. And so I was really looking for things to continue to progress. After I got done with my workout, Roxanne had shown up with our very nutritious waffles, very similar
Tradition.
to very
tradition.
We had the same waffles before Owen's birth. So I get up, I go eat breakfast. It's really awesome. And then my husband took like very copious notes of our labor because I told him that I wanted to remember what happened. And so he has in here like 10 a.m. Gina shower. So when I was in the shower, I was still having contractions about every 10 to 15 minutes. He starts setting up the room because he's like, I need something to do with my hands. Like, give me a task. And so he blows up the pool. The kids are like playing in the pool. They're having a great time. We haven't filled it up yet. They're just playing in an empty pool. But during the beginning part of my labor, so I'm still in early labor, things are just like not progressing. Like I'm still kind of stuck at this like 8 to 10 to 15 minute time frame. And it's been like 6 hours. And so I had sort of told myself that I was going to have a baby by now. Just nothing was like really progressing. And so I was getting like very frustrated. I think I cried at one point. And so Roxanne is like really trying to like build me back up and is like, it's okay, Gina. Like, let's do some spinning babies. Let's take a nap. And so we started to do some stuff to try to encourage things to like begin. And what's really wild is at this time we had a hurricane that was happening. So Hurricane Ian.
Hurricane Ian.
I cannot say the name. I'm even looking at it.
Hurricane Ian.
So I have mispronounced Ian for like 7 months now.
Since it happened. She has always called
Ian.
it Hurricane Ian.
So that morning, Hurricane Ian was hitting the coast of North Carolina. And so we were seeing the effects of it. Wind was blowing a ton outside. The trees were like bending. And then the power went out. And I was so concerned because what I really wanted to do when I was laboring and what I knew was going to be really important to me was taking a really hot shower. And so my water heater is probably like at an illegal level of heat because I like to scald myself as I shower. Nobody showers with me because I'm taking this boiling water shower right now. And so I was really concerned that the power being out meant that I was not going to have hot water. And my amazing midwife was like, it's okay, Gina. People have given birth before without hot water. And I was like, Nancy, I live in a life of luxury and I want hot water. And my husband also assured me that our water heater was really large. And so it would be fine. Like we would have hot water for a prolonged period of time. But I was still like very concerned about this. So every time the storm kind of increased in intensity, my contractions would also like pick up in intensity. And so it was like really exciting. Everyone had shown up at this point. So my midwife was there, her birth assistant was there. And it worked out because they all arrived like shortly before the sunset, which would have potentially been kind of dangerous for them to drive around on back roads. And so everyone was like really happy that they showed up when they did. But then I felt bad because I wasn't in active labor yet. And I felt like I was wasting everyone's time. which was just adding to kind of my like mental overwhelm. So I decided like, okay, maybe my contractions are not picking up more. I'm not progressing into a more active labor pattern because like Sophie's position is maybe a little bit off. So I did an open knee chest inversion for about 20 minutes. Like as soon as I got up from it, I started eating some like ramen that we made, and I like really felt like my contractions had shifted. And so at this point they had went from being like every 8 to 10 minutes apart to about like every 4 to 5 minutes apart. And I was like, awesome. So everyone starts filling up the pool. I get in the shower and turn on my scalding hot water while my 2 children are playing in the birth pool. They're splashing around, having a great time. And then my contractions are starting to pick up even more. My mom at this point, so this is like 6:30 p.m. So I've been in labor for about where I've noticed about like 11 hours. My mom is like, I have to go get the sump pump, and was really like adamant that it was so necessary and that we needed to go. I think her and Roxanne like argued about it, like whether or not this was important, because my mom was also the person that was like watching like my children. So it's really important at home births to have somebody like assigned to your kids. And speaking of children, it was really sweet. So like I was curious how Owen was going to be during the birth because he was only like just over 2 at this point. And so with his birth, Adeline was 3, and she was like very aware and like could conceptualize that there was a baby that was coming to play with her. And she was like really excited about that. And Owen was like talking, but like he wasn't like as clear. And like, I'm not sure that he totally understood that there was like a new baby coming. And he ended up being like really sweet during my labor, especially the early part. Like he wanted to stand next to me. He was like holding onto my leg and like rubbing my back and rubbing my belly. And so he was like my little mini doula. Adeline, who I thought was going to be like super emotionally invested in this labor, was 5. And so I think like just based on her like development at this point was a little bit more like matter of fact. And so she would come in and be like, when is my baby sister going to be here? And I would be like, when I start pushing. And she's like, okay, bye. And then would go back and go play. And then would come back in and be like, are you pushing yet? And I was like, no. And so the plan was for her to be in the water with me as I pushed Sophie out. And so she was like in her swimsuit, like ready to go for that. Adeline also was the one that predicted that we would have a girl. And so even before I found out that I was pregnant, Adeline asked me if I could ask Daddy for a seed so that she could have a baby sister. And so she had asked me previously like how babies were made, and I didn't want to get super graphic with it. So I was like, well, a daddy gives a mommy a seed and she plants it and then makes a baby. And so she was like, can you ask Daddy for a seed? Because I want a baby sister. And then like the next day we found out that we were pregnant. And then she was like, it's a girl. I'm having a baby sister. And so we did a gender reveal like pretty early because we did like a blood test to see what the sex of the baby was. And she was like, it's a girl. And I was like, oh my God, I hope it's a girl, because if it's not, like I'm going to have to spend 9 months like consoling my daughter. I mean, it was a girl, and it was really cool. So she would just come in and ask like, is my baby sister coming yet? Because I would really like to meet her. While Owen was like much more emotionally invested in the labor. So around like 7 p.m., like everyone's here, and I really feel like my contractions have shifted into like a more like early active pattern where I'm needing support during the contractions, but I'm still like very present in between. And I'm finding myself getting like a little bit frustrated that things are not progressing into active labor yet. Like it just feels like this like process is like taking forever. And like when I look back at Owen's labor, I woke up at like 6 and I was having contractions. And then by like 4, I was in active labor. And then he was born at like 9 p.m. And so we're already getting close to already being within the time frame that like I've already had Owen. And so I found myself getting like really frustrated that I was still not progressing into active labor. And so I'm in the tub and I'm just kind of like, what is going on? And so my midwife asked me like, hey, like, would you like me to do a cervical exam to kind of do an assessment and see how things are going? And then, we can do a membrane sweep. We can like do a tincture. We can take some castor oil. We can pick things up a little bit. And I was like, absolutely. It's like 8 p.m. Like nothing is really happening. Or I guess it's almost 9 at this point. And so Sophie's LOT at this point, I was about 4 centimeters. She's like kind of engaged, but not totally engaged. So I think her head maybe needed to tuck a little bit more still. So Nancy, my midwife, did a membrane strip, and then we did a labor tincture, and then I took 2 ounces of castor oil, just like straight up like a shot. Within like 30 minutes, my contractions like picked up from being about like every 5-ish minutes apart to like every 2 minutes apart. And I was in active labor at this point. So the combination of those 3 things, it might have just been the strip by itself, like really kickstarted active labor for me. And I was definitely making a lot more noise with them. I had really progressed into that active labor pattern. So I get in the shower, I'm doing like nipple stimulation to try to like make sure things are continuing to progress. And after about like 15 minutes of this, we realized that things were going to continue to stay active and that I didn't need to do it anymore. By like 11, like all my comfort measures were not feeling super great. Like, so I had probably been in a more active labor pattern for about like an hour and a half at this point. Roxanne probably at this point was like, she's in transition. And I definitely felt that I was starting to move into transition because I could feel myself like mentally being like kind of scared of like what was next. And so I remembered the intensity of pushing from Owen's birth, and it was a really powerful feeling, and it was like a really like out of body experience, and it was a really cool experience to have done, but it was really intense. And so I was kind of afraid of it happening again. Because nothing was really working for me, Roxanne was like, well, do you want to get in a tub? And I was also starting to feel like more pressure. I was probably going to start pushing soon. And so this was about like 11. We take the cover off of the pool. And so we had this great idea to put a hypothermia blanket on top of the pool to keep it from getting cold. And you would think that would be a great idea. Like, this blanket is supposed to keep things super warm. Unfortunately, the reason why those blankets keep things super warm is there's this like weird filling within them, similar to a consistency of like a diaper, that is what keeps those blankets super warm. And so inside of that blanket had seeped into the pool. And so we pull the cover off, and I look and I see what it looks like. And I fully understand that I cannot have my baby in that water. Like, that there's probably like a level of like toxic like sludge in that pool that is like not safe. And so the birth assistant and Roxanne tried to like scoop it out, like, it'll be fine. And then as they try to scoop it out, it just like disintegrates in their hand. And we understood that we needed to empty the pool and then refill it. And I was very sad. So I just sat down on the bed, like super defeated, and realized that I was again not going to have a water birth because I was going to start pushing soon. And I'm sure Roxanne can comment on how her and the birth assistant were just panicking about how they were not going to refill this in time because Gina was going to start pushing soon.
I do remember I looked at the birth center and we're like, Gina is in transition. She's going to have this baby soon. We can still try to fill this pool up as fast as we can, though. And I remember seeing Gina sitting on the side of the bed and she just looked so sad. So I was like, maybe we have time. But like, we both looked at each other and we're like, Gina is going to have this baby soon. This is derailing her labor. I have never moved so quickly to empty a birth pool in my life. And my mom just goes, I have the sump pump. It'll be quicker with the sump pump. I don't know. She's very set that it was really beneficial. I don't know if it necessarily was any quicker with her loud sump pump. It was so loud. This thing, I don't even know what contraption she's made to make this work, but it was insane. But I was using a garbage can to like empty this water out in her shower. We like run outside. My mom, the birth assistant, and I run outside with the pool to like hose it down so that we got all the chemicals out of there, and then run back in and fill it back up. It was not in time for Gina's transition to end from the stress.
So I managed to just like stop my labor for the hour it took for them to refill the pool. And so there's sometimes this phase between pushing and transition called like rest and be thankful. So like my body was like, we will rest and we will be very thankful right now. And so my labor just like paused or stalled for about an hour. Like, I was still having contractions, but they definitely had spaced out, and I was almost kind of like dozing off in between them. I think my son even came up and like snuggled up next to me too. So after they refilled the pool, and it took about an hour, I got back in the pool, and just labored in there. But everything was like in my hips, and I knew that this meant I was going to start pushing soon, because as my labor progresses and my baby gets super low, I feel a little bit more pressure, and I also feel a lot more in my hips. And I was trying to like check myself to see, but I have no idea what I'm feeling for. And Roxanne was like, well, do you want Nancy to check you? And I was like, no. And I kept saying no because I was terrified that she would come and be like, you're 4.5 centimeters. And I was like, that will just destroy my soul. So I'm either going to start pushing soon, or I'm not going to know how dilated I am. And so I'm like trying to see what's going on. Roxanne later says I was probably just feeling my baby's head, or like the amniotic fluid sac on my baby's head. And then I also knew as soon as I stand up, I'm going to start pushing. And I was like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that intensity yet. And so I just kind of kept like wailing around in the pool, like while my mom and Roxanne were like rubbing furiously at my hips, because that was like the only thing that was helping. Earlier in the night, my husband was like the big counter pressure person. And I think he complained at one point that his chest was tired. Just like fireballs like shot out of my eyes. And I was like, excuse me? Like, how dare you say that you are tired right now?
He was also jammed in the corner of the bedroom because we pushed the birth tub too close to the wall. He is a tall man jammed into this very, very small space. Like, I could barely sit in it, and he just took it. I actually asked him one time, I was like, do you want to switch? He's like, no, I'm fine. I feel nothing. And I'm like, you feel a lot of things.
Well, he definitely did that because earlier in the night he was complaining about the counter pressure for like half a second, and I was like, I will divorce you. So I also had like a really big vision of like the photos that I wanted. I kept this in like the back of my head. And so I was like, the photo that I want is my husband behind me in the pool, but he didn't want to get in the pool. So I was like, all right, well, you'll sit outside the pool behind me. But I wanted to make sure that I was positioned well for the photographer to take a photo of me catching my own baby, which I should have just realized was not going to happen. Like, I am just not that serene birther where I was just going to gracefully grab my baby and pull her to my chest. Like, I was hanging on for like dear life whenever I push. And so I should have just thrown that image out of my head. So I was like, you will stay in this corner because this is where you need to be for my photos. So I was like, all right, I need to stand up because I'm feeling pressure. I know as soon as I stand up, I'm going to start pushing. So I stand up and immediately like Sophie drops and I'm like, I have to poop. And Roxanne was like, no, it's your baby. And I was like, no, Roxanne, it is poop. It is both. I know I'm pushing, but there's poop coming out of my body.
I need to poop.
So I jump out of the pool. I don't know how I moved this quickly, and I like beeline it directly for the toilet. So the castor oil at this point had been about 3 hours since I took it, was hitting me. And my midwife is like casually following me just with the tray of things that trinkets that she needs for the delivery. I sit down on the toilet for my next contraction, and I'm like, immediately no. Immediately no. And I stand up and proceed to just like poop on the floor. And I'm like, I'm pooping right now. I don't care, as I am pushing. Poor Roxanne. And so my midwife is like, okay, we're going to have a baby in the bathroom. And I'm like, no, we are not. We are having a baby in that water because I did not get a water birth last time. And that's all I want right now is to have my baby in the water. And so I am like speed walking back to the pool from our bathroom. And it's probably like 20 feet. Roxanne is like trailing me, wiping the poop off of my leg. And she cleans it up off the floor. And I'm like, thank you for being a nurse and knowing how to do all that. And my midwife is just following with her tray of things. And I like jump back in the pool for the next contraction. I do like one push and my water breaks and I'm like, my water broke. And then at this point, I realize that I am going to have a baby soon. My vision of my children being in the pool with me needs to happen. And so I'm like, grab my kids who are both like passed out on the couch that's right outside our bedroom. So Adeline is like ready to go. She's got her swimsuit on. She jumps in. She's just waking up and is a little disoriented. It's also like 1 a.m. at this point. My son is like, what is happening right now? My mom is yelling. And so they're like, do you want to get in the pool? And she's like, no. And so he sees Adeline get in the pool, and then I am like starting to push again, and he's like, I want to get in the pool too. And so as I'm pushing, my mom places him between my legs. And I'm like, not a good spot. Like, is he going to catch the baby? Like, what's the plan right here? And so then after I finished pushing, somebody moved him to the side. So they're both to my side now, like really excited to meet their sister. And at this point, they're checking for baby's heart rate and they see that her heart rate is like really low. And so they prompt me to like get out of the pool because if there is an issue, it'll be easier to respond to this issue if we're on the bed. And so I'm like, my water birth. So I quickly get up out of the pool, get back in the bed in like the same position that I was for Owen's birth. And so my husband like later says that he was like really concerned that something was wrong because the midwife didn't like prompt him to come and catch Sophie because like she was thinking like I was still going to try to do it. But I was like just hanging on to anything that was nearby, like gripping like the bed or the side of the pool. I was not the serene pusher. So Sophie, I could feel her crowning and I was trying to like slow it down. And Roxanne was like, she's not crowning quite yet, Gina, keep pushing. And I was like, I will not tear because I don't want to have to get a repair unmedicated. And so I ease her head out and I'm like, oh, thank God. And then the rest of her body didn't just fly out with her. And I was like, oh no. Because Owen just like flew out and I was like, oh, thank God, the relief. And so for her, I'm like, oh man, like the next contraction, she rotated and her shoulders came right out and then she was placed on my chest. And it was like instant relief. I was like, oh, like my baby, like I'm so glad that you're here. Adeline was like really excited. She was like right by me. As I was pushing, she was like, is this painful? And I was like, yes. And then Owen is just like, what is happening?
We also woke them up. Like, as Gina started pushing in the tub, both of her kids were asleep on the couch, and I had to run out and wake them up. So Adeline woke up immediately and was like, yes, she's here. I'm so excited. Owen was like, I don't know what is happening around me. There's a lot of people, and the room is very bright.
But it was really cool about home birth is that you can have your whole family there. So like my mom was there, Roxanne was there, my husband was obviously there, our 2 kids were there to witness Sophie coming into the world. She just came to my chest and we just kind of hung out there for probably like an hour or so. Both the kids wanted to hold her, Owen for like half a second, and then he was like, JK, I don't want to hold you anymore. But it was really nice to be able to experience this all as a family together and to be in our own home, to welcome our baby there. And then the postpartum care is like really nice with home births because they come back 24 hours. They come back at like 7 days, 14 days, and then you go see them at 6 weeks. So you get like a lot more postpartum support, which is really awesome with a home birth. So Sophie's total labor from when I was woken up by contractions to like birth was probably about like 16 hours. And my like actual active labor was probably like 4-ish hours with that like hour of like rest before I started pushing. I only pushed for like maybe like 5 or 7 minutes from when I came out of the pool and was like, I need to poop, and pooped and then made it somehow back to the pool and then onto the bed was like a really short period of time. And pushing is definitely still the most intense and out-of-body experience for me. I definitely felt a little bit more scared of it this time because I knew how intense it was going to be. And it was kind of like funny because for one of the first births that I supported after Sophie was one of my friends who was having her second unmedicated birth. And she was also like, I'm really scared for pushing. And I was like, I know, I feel you. And her husband was like, that's not helpful. And I'm like, I understand you. I see you. Like, I know what you're scared of right now. So if it is your like second unmedicated birth, know that it's okay to be a little apprehensive about certain aspects of it. I'm still really glad that I had a home birth, that I had an unmedicated birth. It was an incredible experience. It was so empowering to like be at home surrounded by everyone that I love and to only have people in my space that I knew that I trust and that I wanted to be there, which was really different compared to like my first birth in the hospital where there was just like random people I've probably never spoke to and to this day still haven't spoken to. So protecting my space was really important for me when it comes to my births, and home birth is a way that I can do that. The care that I receive with a home birth midwife, I felt like is so much more than when I was in a hospital setting because all my appointments were like an hour long. My postpartum appointments, I had like way more of them as well. And so choosing to do home birth a second time was like a no-brainer for me personally. Roxanne would not want to do a home birth, and that's fine. Not everybody has to have or do the same type of birth that I'm doing in order to have an empowering experience. For me, choosing to go unmedicated was worth it. The power that I felt, the rawness of the labor was just really hard to beat. And it was something that I was like really proud to have been able to do and be able to do it 2 times now. Immediately after Sophie was born, I definitely felt like I was mourning the fact that it was potentially our last baby, and it was the last time that we were gonna have a pregnancy together and a labor together, and was definitely like struggling with like our mortality a lot, because I think whenever you have like a new chapter or a new beginning, you're reminded that it will end one day. And that was like what I really struggled with for a few weeks after her birth, where I found myself like almost consumed with the realization that one day my children won't have me, or that they'll grow up, and that this was my last baby. And so as I'm like sobbing about this, I tell my husband, I'm like, I know we said we would only have 3, but I need to believe that a 4th one is a possibility. Otherwise, like, I'm not going to survive like the emotional likeness of this early postpartum, as I'm just like sobbing. And he's like, okay, we can have 4 kids. So we compromised, and now we're having 4 babies. So, MamasteFit baby coming 2024. I have to let Roxanne take her a year to procreate and have a baby. But really struggling with, hey, like, this is a new beginning and one day it eventually will end. It was like really hard. And I think it's something that as a mother of young children, we can find ourselves really consumed with, because there's so much out there about, enjoy every moment. Like, you'll blink and they'll grow up, because that's what's been happening. Like, I blink and my baby from 2017 is like almost 6 years old now. My little baby boy is like almost 3, and Sophie's already like almost 6 months. And so everything just feels like it's going so fast, and there's like nothing that I can do to like slow down time or to like guarantee anything. And so essentially what I have started doing, because my daughter was also starting to go through a phase where she understood like the finiteness of life and was like finding herself really scared of death. She and I just kind of had a conversation where we're like, hey, like, we all will one day leave this world, and all we can do is make sure at the end we have a lot of really good memories and that we have lived a life worth living. And so before Sophie was born, she had this whole like plan that she wanted to have a big slumber party, and we were going to do all these activities when she was born, because she wanted to make sure Sophie had really good memories. And it was like so sweet. And we did eventually do like the slumber party and everything for Sophie's 100 days. And so each day I try to really focus on, can we finish this day with good memories as my essentially coping mechanism to realize that one day this time will pass. And so I don't want to find myself thinking like, oh, well, in 6 months we'll do that thing, or in 2 years we'll do that thing. Like, I want to be excited at the moment that I'm at right now with my children and with my family, so that we have good memories. So at the end of each day, we kind of go over like, what was our favorite part of the day? What would we like to do tomorrow, like all together as a family, and kind of really emphasizing more of that family time has been really helpful for me as I kind of navigate this. I guess I'm not super early postpartum anymore, but that's what like really helped me in those early days when I was like drowning in the sorrow of the fact that all of our stories will end one day. So sorry to end my very happy birth story on that note, but that was definitely something that I was struggling with after Sophie was born. And yeah, we are planning to have a 4th baby. I did convince my husband while I was crying, and then I brought it up later and he was still in agreement with me. So stay tuned for the 7th MamasteFit baby, the 4th of mine, because Roxanne and I are 2 different people. Our husbands have told us, though, that we can't just continue to get pregnant because it's not a sustainable business model, and I beg to differ.
It's the closing of a chapter that I'm not ready to close.
Especially when I think I've discovered in the past like 6 years how cool motherhood is. I felt like if I look back at myself as I was growing up, it was never like, oh, I can't wait to grow up and be a mom. It was like, oh, I can't wait to grow up and be a doctor, or some sort of like career or profession was how we defined the things that we should want in success. And so when I became a mom, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, why are more people not talking about how amazing becoming a mother is? Like, this is the greatest adventure of my life. And so it is like a little sad to know that one day this like chapter will end, but I will live it for a few more years at least, or at least the pregnancy part of it. And it is really cool to see my kids grow up because they just continue to be like the coolest people that I know. And I made them myself, which is awesome. Or I guess not totally by myself. I did a lot of the work though. It's a group project where one person brought markers and you did everything else. Thank you for listening to my third birth story, the birth of my daughter, Sophie. I know a lot of you followed my pregnancy and then were really excited for my birth, and I really appreciate everyone's like kind messages and loving thoughts as I was navigating being very overdue. It means a lot to be able to connect with so many people with our Instagram platform, with our different social media platforms, and now with this podcast. To be able to share our stories and to inspire others to seek the birth that they want, to navigate motherhood in the best way that they want to, and knowing that you don't have to do things like us. You don't have to give birth at home. You don't have to parent like I do. Like Roxanne and I both parent differently from one another, and we're sisters. So we hope that you feel welcomed in this community that we've built, knowing that you can be you in the way that you are. If you enjoy this episode, be sure to follow our podcast. We release new episodes every Wednesday. The MamasteFit Podcast is sponsored by Needed, a nutrition company focused on optimal nourishment for your perinatal journey. Use code MamasteFitPod for 20% off your first order.